Good morning, Grace Church. So I got to tell you something. When for many years of my ministry, I felt like I've spent time telling churches that it's okay to sing during worship. Like you got a band up here doing everything they can and like nothing behind. And 2 songs ago, there was a wall of sound coming from behind me. Y'all are in it and grateful to God for his faithfulness. It's incredible. It's a privilege to worship together here. Would you pray with me as we start? Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Melt me, mold me, fill me, use me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Amen. So we're in week 2 of this series, Life Together, and we're talking about how we're made for community and what the characteristics of community are. And one of the things that we say defines a good Christian community is love. But there's a whole lot that comes with that word, right? We've written countless songs about it. The Beatles say, all you need is, yeah, and then someone else says, one thing's for sure, love stinks. Now, what do we do? What do we do with that? We've written books about it and songs about it. It's literally a tale as old as time, but something that's still fresh too. But we're not going to break into all the romance songs this morning. We're going to talk about love as an incredibly powerful force that weaves through every moment of our lives. It's a gift that comes in so many forms, each one of those forms shaping us and molding us and teaching us in ways that we could never imagine. Think about it. Love can lift us to the highest of heights, filling our souls with joy and our lives with light, but it can also challenge us. Test us. Sometimes love can even break us down. Love is complex like that. It's not always easy. It doesn't always come the way that we expect, but it's always there, touching each one of us uniquely, sparking connections, creating memories, and sometimes even presenting difficulties. We've all been there. We've all felt the warmth of love's embrace, but we've also felt its sting. There are times when love is the sweetest thing, and there are times that it's just plain hard. And let's be really honest, we've all had times where we have found ourselves looking for love in all the wrong places, right? We chase after it thinking that if I find this love, it'll solve all of my problems, only to realize that it's a false love, it's not true love, and true love is something that we can't force or control. So I found some statements this week about the glories and the difficulties of love. See if any of these make sense to you. Love makes the world go round. When there's love, there is life. Love gives you wings. Love makes your soul crawl out from its hiding place. All you need is love. Love is a great master. It teaches us to be what we never were. Love is sharing your popcorn. I actually disagree with that statement a little bit, because when I go to the movies, I like a ton of butter and a massive amount of salt on my popcorn, and Brittany likes to mix her M&Ms in the popcorn, which I find absolutely revolting. So for us, true love is making sure we each get our own popcorn. Then there are the statements about the difficulties of love. Love is like war. It's easy to begin, but very hard to stop. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love means slowly losing your mind. Love is like an hourglass, with the heart filling up as the brain empties. I love you even more than I am annoyed by you, which is a lot. Don't fall in love. Fall off a bridge. It hurts less. Love is in the air, and it's on its way to the nearest allergy sufferer. And then here's my favorite. Relationships are like a walk in the park. Jurassic Park. It's so true. You can be going through your day and suddenly you're being chased by a T-Rex. And there's some truth in all of these statements. Love can be great, but it can also be a little bit like Jurassic Park. And yet at the end of the day, we all learn to love and to be loved. Psychologists tell us that love is crucial to our well-being. It's essential for a child's brain development, and it's beneficial for us into adulthood. Love and affection lower blood pressure, enhance our mood, reduce stress, boost our immunity, increase our happiness. These are benefits that are wired into us, underscoring that need to love and be loved. So it's no surprise then that the foundation of the Christian life and our life together in community in the church would be love. One day, a legal expert, a teacher of the law, came up to Jesus and he asked him this, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" He responded, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself." So we're asking the question in community, what does it mean to really love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and to love others, to love yourself with that same kind of love? That's what we're diving into. We're talking about a love that's deep, transformative, that's all-encompassing. Now, again, it's kind of a mixed bag. The word love is kind of a catch-all in the English language. It can mean anything from a simple affection to profound divine love that feels like it can move mountains. But in other languages, there are many different words for various types of love, each with its own specific meaning. So we're going to talk about what the New Testament, written in Greek, means when it says love. And to understand when we understand these distinctions, we start to understand what kind of love Jesus is calling us to live by, to guide our lives together. So, like I said, the New Testament is originally written in the language of Greek, and the Greeks had several words for love, and the New Testament writers used 4 of these words. So I'm going to geek out for a minute, and hopefully you learn something too. So first is eros. That's romantic or passionate love. Then there's phileo, which is the kind of love you feel for friends or a sibling. Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, right? It's about companionship and goodwill. Next up is storge. That's a love in familial bonds, like the love between parents and children. And finally, there is agape. That's the highest form of love. It's selfless, unconditional, sacrificial. It's the love that God has for us, the love that we're called to have for one another. And understanding these distinctions helps us to see the full picture of our life together. It's not just about feeling warm and fuzzy. It's about commitment, sacrifice, a deep, abiding care for one another in community. So we're going to explore what it means to live out that kind of agape love in our daily lives, loving God with our whole being and loving others as ourselves. It's a high calling, but it's the essence of what it means to follow Jesus. So we need to focus on agape love, that unconditional, sacrificial love that I don't know that I even began to grasp until I held my daughters. A love that would do anything, would stop at no lengths. And that's what the New Testament tells us is the kind of love that God has for us. In fact, the New Testament describes God as this kind of love. In 1 John 4:8, it simply says, God is love, meaning God's very essence is love. It's not a characteristic. God isn't like love. It doesn't just have certain traits that are love. Love defines God's core being. Agape love is selfless. It's a deliberate choice to care for others without expecting anything in return. Jesus embodies this love for us, revealing its full depth through his life and his actions. Jesus is the one that Paul writes about in Philippians chapter 2, and Paul says this about Jesus, that he was being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used for his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. When Jesus came, he reveals agape love in an unprecedented way. And here's what I mean by that. Unlike the ancient gods that demanded tribute, Jesus reveals a God who sacrifices himself on behalf of humanity. Instead of us offering something, he offers himself to us. He demonstrates selfless love, giving up his power for the good of people. So often we hear people talk about they're trying to rise, they're going up in life, they're climbing some kind of ladder. We follow a God who went down to show us the full depths of love. He demonstrated selfless love, giving up his power for the good of people. He embodied this agape love, showing us what divine love looks like wrapped up as a human being. So we have this phrase that's becoming a core part of our mission here at Grace Church. It's that our community would make more and maturing disciples of Jesus. Disciple is just a fun word for follower or apprentice or learner. So we desire to do life together in a community where people are becoming followers of Jesus, new people are becoming followers of Jesus, but where all of us are growing up, maturing into our relationship with Jesus. And this is how Jesus tells us love is meant to define our life together. When he was about to go to the cross, he shared a last meal with his closest followers, and he gave them a really long talk to encourage them. And we can read about it at the end of the Gospel of John. And this is what Jesus says. He talks about love a lot, and every time the New Testament writers write this down with the word agape. So I've highlighted it that way on the screen so you can see that it's agape. A new command I give you, agape one another. Selfless, unconditional, sacrificial love. Do that for one another. As I have agape you, so you must agape one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you agape one another. Jesus' final command to his followers maybe isn't what you expect. His final command to his followers was to love as he loved us with unconditional love. Maturing as a disciple means growing in this love, receiving the love of Jesus, abiding in it, and then sharing it with others. This is the path of more and maturing disciples. It's the way of love that Jesus calls us to. So here's our big idea for today. Usually it's the end. I'm doing it up front. Healthy life together depends on love. Agape love. You say that with me? Healthy life together depends on love. Agape love. That's it. That's the bottom line of the whole thing. If we're going to do this thing together of being a church of more and maturing disciples, if we're going to live together in life together, love has to be the core of who we are. Our life together depends on it. Jesus calls us to love as he loves us, but that's hard to live out in daily life, right? Right. Because life's a collision sport. I bump into other people all the time. They bump into me. And when I bump into them and they bump into me, love's the last thing on my mind. So, we have to learn how to do this daily. So we're going to turn to a timeless passage in the New Testament, often called the user's guide to agape love. So the Apostle Paul wrote this letter as a guide to the Christians living in a city called Corinth. They were living in a really divided city, and they struggled with love in their church community. Paul's words offer a practical roadmap showing us how to practice agape in our relationships in every mundane and frustrating moment. But first, here's some of the things that were going on in the Corinthian church. First, there were rivalries in leadership. They were arguing about whether they followed Paul or whether they followed this guy named Apollos. Paul and Apollos were both leaders in the church community, and they each had kind of their own following. The wealthy people kind of gravitated towards Apollos, while those that were of less means gravitated towards Paul. And this division led to rivalries in the church, with people starting to pop up saying, I follow Paul. No, I follow Apollos. Instead of declaring together, we follow Jesus. That love in the community is about more than an individual personality. Then there were cultural values versus Jesus values. Greek and Roman cultural values were steering the church community away from Jesus' teachings. If that doesn't sound like 2024, I don't know what does. Christians were suing one another. High-status individuals gorged themselves on the food at church, while others of lower status went hungry. Some even dined in pagan temples, which was a no-no. All of this was eroding love in the community. Then there was pride. The Corinthians were a vibrant community. They prayed in tongues. They were able to pray in other languages, and they were able to prophesy under the Spirit's guidance. Those are things that still happen today. The issue wasn't the gifts themselves, as we talked about last week on Pentecost, but it built arrogance in them. They believed that because they had these spiritual gifts that they were superior to other people. And instead of serving the community, they used their gifts to inflate their own egos. Then there was sexual misconduct in the church. The Greek, Roman, and Corinthian societies were highly sexual societies, and it caused disagreements in the church about what was appropriate sexual conduct for Christians. Paul highlights a case where a man married his father's wife. Don't think about it too long. A man married his father's wife, and shockingly, some people were going around bragging about it. Paul, obviously, isn't very happy with this situation. Then there's the end times. There were all sorts of ideas about the end times and what was going to happen, the nature of the body after death, the resurrection, some of the same things that church people argue about today. And these speculations caused dissension in the community and undermined the love they were supposed to have. That's a lot of problems going on in that church. The Corinthians were navigating a relational Jurassic Park. We can see similarities between their community and the church at large in America today. These relational dinos, if you will, never seem to go away. So Paul has the tough job of addressing this mess. Imagine dealing with this community of landmines. The book that we know as 1 Corinthians is Paul's attempt to tackle each one of those issues. And amidst all sorts of practical instructions, Paul takes this beautiful detour and he writes a beautiful description about what love is. And he says, this is the more excellent way. You're doing all of this stuff. This is what you're doing wrong. This is the better way. The Detour has become one of the most famous writings on love, and it's our user's guide to love in a healthy community. You've probably heard this passage, especially at weddings. You probably know it. Love is patient. Love is kind, okay? The passage is often associated with romantic love, and while you certainly need agape love in marriage, it's actually talking about God's love and exercising that kind of love in Christian community. So thanks to the unruly Corinthians, we have this user's guide to agape, dealing with what it looks like to live this out in real life and how we can practice it. So I'm going to read this whole user's guide on agape love for us, okay? 1 Corinthians chapter 13. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part. Then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Let me ask you something when it comes to the user's guide. The way that you live out love in the way that Jesus says we're meant to love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, to love others as we love ourselves, how much of that description sounds like you? What do you struggle with the most? For some, it's anger. Love is not angry. For some, it's pride. My guess is, for a great many of us, it's patience. At least it's that way for me. When I look through that list and think, am I a patient father? Is my love patient? Not always. Am I a patient husband? Not always. Am I patient with the people that I encounter every day as I seek to share the love of Jesus with them? Hard swallow. No. The point is, agape love is hard for everyone. It's not an easy calling, but if we begin to lean into this way of being, if we commit to becoming this kind of people and community, these things will start to fall into place. We'll experience more freedom, more peace, and joy than we can imagine. The agape love path of Jesus leads to inner transformation and the abundant life that Jesus talks about. It also leads to a mature and healthy and holy community. So even though it's challenging, this is what we ascribe to. We need to open ourselves to this kind of love. So Paul writes this ultimate description of agape love in 3 sections. In the first part, he talks about the necessity of agape love. Basically, he says that you could do all the good in the world. You could be some kind of spiritual giant. You could be at the top of the ladder. But if your good works aren't motivated by and grounded in love, it's nothing. It's worthless. All of our striving and trying basically adds up to 0. It's all meaningless unless it's motivated by love. In the second part, he talks about the characteristics of this type of love. And it's a list that is so challenging to us. It's also the list that's part of the user's guide. He names 2 positive ways that we see love lived out. It's lived out in patience and kindness. And then he gives us 8 examples of what love does not do. Which is funny and kind of ironic. All of these examples are things that Paul has already told the Corinthians that they're guilty of doing earlier in the letter. So he's basically saying, hey, I told you all this stuff you're doing wrong. And if you want to know what love looks like, stop doing the things that you're doing. This is what you should do. Try the opposite of how you've been treating one another. So Paul ends the whole thing with 4 positive verbs, this time adding always in front of them. Love always protects, it always trusts, it always hopes, it always perseveres. And then in the final part of the user's guide, he talks about this, the permanence of love. He returns to this idea of spiritual gifts that the Corinthians were kind of obsessed with. He says that the prophecies you have, the prayers in unknown languages, the special knowledge that the Spirit has given you, it is going to fade away. They're all good gifts, but in the future world, they won't exist because they won't be needed. On that day, instead of seeing only a part of God, like in a mirror, we'll see God face to face. When it comes to Jesus and the fullness of his kingdom, we won't need to prophesy. We won't need to pray in other languages or have special knowledge because we'll be in full union with Jesus. We won't need anything else. But love will always endure. He said faith, hope, and love, these 3 remain. But even faith and hope will no longer be there because our faith will have become sight and our hope will have been fulfilled. What's left? Love. Because God is love, he's transforming us into love too. So now we've got an overview of the passage. Let's zoom in onto that central part, the section that focuses on the characteristics of agape love, the user's guide. What is agape love? Love is patient and kind. Agape love does not envy, boast. It is not proud. If you've been married for longer than 5 minutes, you know that's really hard. Agape love does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, keeps no record of wrongs. Agape does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Agape love always protects, trusts, hopes, perseveres. If we want to live out God's love, God's way in all of our relationships, here's the path. Love is patient and kind. It starts there. Some of us have literally prayed the prayer, Lord, I want to be like you, but can we save the patience part for later? Patience is often translated as long suffering. It's not something that we enjoy, but we can't experience agape love without patience. It comes first. We may struggle with patience, but it's awesome to be on the receiving end of patience, right? Remember a time when you were difficult? Nobody in here has ever been difficult, right? Remember a time that you were difficult and someone showed you patience? They stayed with you calmly. They helped you through it. It's a rare gift we give each other when we choose the path of patience. Even if you've never experienced patience in a relationship, God is always patient with us every hour of every day. Paul starts with patience and kindness to describe God's love. Patience is how God receives us. Kindness is how God approaches us. God doesn't come at you with a list of everything you've done wrong, full of judgment and wrath. If you've been told that, it's wrong. God approaches you with kindness. It's the kindness of God that leads us to repentance, that leads us to a transformed life. Patience is how God receives us. Kindness is how God approaches us. In a relationship, there's give and take. You receive someone's presence and offer yours in return. So in our relationship with God, God receives us with patience. God approaches us with kindness. Let that sink in. Let it settle in. You might even make it more personal. God receives me with patience. God approaches me with kindness. Imagine a God who loves you so much that he receives you with calm patience and approaches you with gentle kindness. Isn't that a God worth following? God never wavers from this stance of love toward you. And when I imagine God in this way, I sense this peace and rest in my heart. When I think of God approaching me with patience and kindness, I start to breathe easier. I feel more peaceful. God receives us with patience, approaches us with kindness. So the question becomes, as we live out life in community, do we receive others with patience and approach them with kindness? Well, do you? When we receive others with patience and approach them with kindness, we're offering the same gift that God gives us. We're beginning to walk in the way of love, following our user's guide. It's then that these statements start to become true of us. I receive others with patience. I approach others with kindness. What if we lived out these statements in community? How might things change if we intentionally gave each other the gifts of patience and kindness? Obviously, we can't do this on our own, but with God, all things are possible. Even receiving the person next to you with patience makes it different. Don't make eye contact. Even receiving the person next to you with patience changes things. So agape love is patient and kind. Maybe we're starting to get that. Then there's this long list of what agape is not. It doesn't envy or boast. It isn't proud. It doesn't dishonor others. It isn't self-seeking. It isn't easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. It doesn't delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. If we thought patience was challenging, how about this? It's a tough list. But as I read through those again, I realize that if we receive others with patience and approach them with kindness, the rest begins to take care of itself. It's hard to be envious. It's hard to be boastful. It's hard to be full of pride when we're focused on patience and kindness. And if we practice kindness, we'll be less inclined to dishonor others and more inclined to want what's best for them. We'll be less preoccupied with ourselves because we're focused on practicing kindness. And if we receive others with patience, we'll be less easily angered and more willing to forgive. We won't be happy when bad things happen, but we'll rejoice when truth and goodness win out in life. So it's a piece of cake. We're done here. We can all do this, right? There's no easy way to live this out and make it our own. We can't force ourselves into patience or kindness or snap our fingers and eliminate envy and anger out of our lives. But we can ask for God's help in living this out and finding simple moments in our days to practice it in our relationships. So a few weeks ago, I was over at our Cape Coral campus, and I was on my way from my office to another meeting, and I was running a little bit late. I'd been held up on a call. And as I was passing through the lobby, I came across one of our exceptional entrepreneurs. It's a special needs ministry that we have at the Cape Coral campus. And I was on my way through, and I just said, "Hey, man, what's up? How you doing?" And he said, "Not too good." Now, any other day, but, "Oh, sorry to hear that. Got to keep going. I'm late for a meeting." I was already late. Approaching others with patience, man, I had to hit the brakes and lean into that conversation and hear about what was going on at home for this young man and all the things that were going wrong. What I did not know, what I could not have known, was that he had just had a long talk with our director of EE, and one of the things that she was praying for at that very moment was that a male figure would come into his life that could share Jesus with him. Patience is love lived out. I'm not a patient person by nature, but it's something that God is growing in me. It's easy to overlook moments like that, but I've got proof in my own life, even in just that snippet of a story, that if you open yourself up to agape love, God will give you the opportunities to live it out. It's a high calling. And the challenge for us is to live in patience and kindness in situations that are a lot harder than the one that I just shared. But the same method works no matter the situation. If we ask God to help us and then we open ourselves to how we need to be patient and how kind the way forward might be, we'll start noticing nudges from the Holy Spirit that put us on the path to love. Paul wraps up the whole user's guide with 4 really strong statements. Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. He's saying love never gives up. Will we always get this right in community? No, but it doesn't give up because love protects and trusts and hopes and perseveres. We're always going to be working out this love thing. It doesn't nitpick faults, but covers them with grace. And it doesn't mean, as we talk about living out this type of love, it doesn't mean that your love needs to be a doormat. Sometimes the best way that you can love someone is to love them from a distance with healthy boundaries. If your well-being is threatened, love guides you to a path of safety, because living in love includes yourself. So here's the bottom line of all this. When it comes to God's love and our love and community, there are no lost causes. Love holds on to faith that somehow, some way, even if we have no idea how, love can win out in our lives and in the lives of others. So really quickly, here's 4 things that I want you to take away. Love starts with God, not with us. Remember, it started with Jesus making himself one of us. Love is an action, not a feeling. That's the most important takeaway for me personally. Love is an action, period. I'm a big feeler, and so I most naturally attach my understanding of love to feeling love for someone, which is really hard to live out. If I feel like I love them, then I think, well, I love that person. But agape love isn't love until it's acted out. Agape love isn't like. We're called to love everyone. That doesn't mean we have to like everyone. If we were able to like everyone, then love wouldn't be such a high bar. It's not the same thing. We're meant to love one another, flaws, disagreements, all. And love begins right where I am. Our everyday normal life is the practicing ground for love. And it starts now with the people that are closest to us. So here's what I want us to do as we think about our life together in community. When you came in this morning, you should have received one of these cards. If you didn't, you can just grab one on the way out. But we're going to throw the user's guide back up there. The love is patient, love is kind. And I want to invite you to take this card and start putting some of these to memory. But as the band comes back up, I want us to just have a moment of prayer here to look through that list and ask the Lord, where do I struggle the most? What on that list doesn't look like me? And then I want you to take it a step further with the card. We left it blank. It doesn't say love is patient, love is kind. I want you to put your name into it. I I want you to make this an affirmation that as you open yourself up to this kind of love, that God would help you to walk in it. Larry is patient. Larry is kind. Larry does not envy. He does not boast, is not proud. Man that doesn't look at all like me, but he's working on me. Let me teach you a good Southern Illinois term. Maybe I've told you before, I don't know. Used to, woulda done. We use this all the time in Illinois. Used to, woulda done. We get this idea that if we look at a list like this and we're not absolutely perfect, that somehow we're failing at the Christian life. But the User's Guide to Agape Love says we're going to work this out together, and we're going to figure this out together, and we're going to learn how to love one another and long suffer together in this patience. So if you can look down that list and think about your life before Jesus, and you are one iota more patient than you used to would have done, he's doing something in you. He doesn't expect us to be all the way there, to clean ourselves up, to wash ourselves up before we come into his presence. Part of our movement, the Wesleyan Methodist movement, is that we're being transformed by love and becoming perfected by love, even when we don't look very much like this. So start to put your name in there and ask the Lord to show you the places that you need to grow the most. Is it patience? Is it kindness? What is it? Fill your name in there. As we sing this closing song, the altar is open for you. If you want somebody to pray with you about how God is growing love in you, lift a hand and we'd be happy to do that. Let's stand together.